Front and center in this movie is none other than the great Victor John Latour, who I think is one of the most underrated actors ever, who does not get his due. But fortunately today we have someone here that is going to help give him his due and reinforce that, and she is a beautifully talented person in her own right, and she's going to talk with me after this about her dad. With that, please welcome the one and only Victoria Latour.
Doesn't she look spectacular? Isn't that, tell us a little bit about the dress. There's a history there, isn't there?
This is my mother's dress from the 1970s. Happy Mother's Day. And she wore it on one of her first dates with my dad.
Oh. Yeah. So this was the first time that you saw Kiss of Death on the big screen, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what was your take on it, watching your dad and all of that?
Well, it's interesting for me always watching his pacing and watching his facial expressions and watching him with the little girls, because I remember being that age and being kind of precocious like that older one a little bit.
Yeah.
And I love the audience reaction to Mildred Dunnock being thrown down the stairs. It was nice. And then
Interesting Mother's Day segue by.
And I love the reaction of Brian Donlevy when my dad says, "Well, you do remember that he killed Rizzo's wife." Oh yeah, and the whole audience is like yeah.
Yeah. How about that? One of the interesting things about this film is that the kind of truncated version where he goes to Sing Sing and then he has to ask, kind of reminiscent of White Heat 2 years later, where when Cagney goes, "How's my mother doing?" and they go, she's dead. She has to ask the guy. They actually filmed and cast Victor's wife, played by Patricia Morrison, who is still with us at 103, believe it or not. God bless her.
And she can still sing.
And she can still sing, and she's phenomenal. But what she told me at a screening was that they actually filmed the scene of his partner Rizzo taking advantage of her while Vic was in prison, and then showed her putting her head inside an oven. And in 1947, that wasn't going to fly. Now, there's two versions on why it got cut out of the film. A long time ago, going through some of the script records, the RKO collection, there was a letter from Zanuck basically saying, "We have to take this out. This is never going to get past the censor's office of her committing suicide and having all this, so we're going to need to edit this out because I'm not going to take on a battle I can't win." Miss Morrison's story is that she was ushered into Zanuck's office, and Zanuck was a notorious lech and made a very crude pass at her and tried to chase her around the desk, and she fended him off, and she feels that's why she was cut out of the picture. So, Now, did your dad, when you were growing up, did he talk about the movies? What was the growing up with Victor Latour experience?
Well, he was pretty much retired at that point.
Yeah, I think he retired the first time when he was like 46 or
yes.
something.
Yes. About 10 years after this film was made,
Yeah.
And, well, most of my memories and stories are, he played, when he retired, he played a lot of golf. He played it at a very high level. He took it seriously, practiced every single day. And we went to a lot of the celebrity golf tournaments. Well, he did. I was too little. But Frank Sinatra, the Frank Sinatra tournament, he went to that. And we actually went several times to the Foster Brooks tournament in Palm Springs.
I can only imagine the Foster Brooks
And
tournament.
I remember I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and I had a thing for Bob Hope, and he was there. And my mom tells the story that I walked in the doorway of the clubhouse and I saw him across the room, and I stood there and just announced to the whole room, "Bob Hope is my boyfriend."
I'm sure that pleased Bob.
Well, he was very nice to me. I knew which ear to talk into, so that was. We also went to another golf tournament in England, and oh goodness, he did a lot of interviews for that, and we ended up meeting there was a big dinner in honor of the charity, and it was a children's charity. And my dad had shipped his Rolls-Royce golf cart that had been given to him by Rolls-Royce to this, to an auction for this children's charity. And part of this was a big dinner at Guildhall, and Vic Damone was singing. The Queen was there. Princess Anne was there. I got to meet Princess Anne. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And I just remember more than anything being disgusted by the baby quail on my plate. I thought that was just inhumane. So
You have the sensitivity to animals. Even
I'm afraid so.
Yes.
And also, Jimmy Stewart would call the house. He was always trying to get my dad to go on cruises. And my dad didn't like cruises. He loved Jimmy Stewart, but he didn't like cruises. He felt like he'd be trapped on that boat. And
A little claustrophobic,
and he wouldn't be able to get away from people that wanted, to kiss him and things like that. So, because that happened a lot. And his really good friend Jim Backus, who he knew from back in the Kentucky Military Institute days.
Yeah, your dad was born in Kentucky.
My dad was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and he got kicked out of about 10 schools, and about the 7th school when he was in 9th grade was the Kentucky Military Institute. And Jim Backus was there, and they spent many hours together walking the cinder track in detention. And they kept in touch over the years. They were in...
He was a very funny man,
Yeah.
Jim Backus.
He was fun. He used to call the house and talk to me as Mr. Magoo.
That is cool.
There's a fun interview with my dad and Jim Backus, and it's Max Baer interviewing them when they're filming Andercles and the Lion.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic because the two of them are just cracking each other up. They sound like a couple of drunk 18-year-olds, basically, And my dad's like, well, you should meet my cousin Immature. And he's like, oh, what about your other cousin, Premature? And they're going, wah! It's so great. I love it.
Well, there was a story that my friend Dick Erdman, who's been our guest here, told me about Backus and your dad going over to the Mexican restaurant right outside Paramount Lucy's, and they were dressed in, bent plumes and armor and everything from making Androcles and the Lion, and they went over there for lunch, and the maitre d' or whoever was seating said, I can't seat you, you guys are in costume, dressed up, and your dad supposedly said, what's the matter, you're going to discriminate against members of the armed forces.
Don't you serve servicemen?
Yeah, don't you serve servicemen, with his sword and everything. So your dad, your dad had this reputation, the famous story of, I'm no actor and I have 64 movies to prove it and all of that stuff. And he definitely was not an ego-driven, self-important movie star, but yet he took acting really seriously. I mean, this is someone who studied at the Pasadena Playhouse and.
He did plays, Maeterlinck plays. He did part 1 and 3 of Back to Methuselah by George Bernard Shaw. He played Cain.
Right.
The last play he did, there was actually a play written by Ben Hecht.
Right.
And
exactly.
I think that might have had something to do with him finally getting discovered.
Yeah, well, I think
I
think he went on Broadway, and there was an Irwin Shaw play that he did really, really well in, and then that led to Hal Roach and 1 Million Years BC.
He was supposed to do the Irwin Shaw play.
Oh, he did not do it?
After he did 4 movies with Hal Roach and with RKO,
Right.
he went to New York because of what you're talking about, because he was going to work with the group theater. But it turned out that he ended up actually on Broadway in Lady in the Dark with written by Kurt Weill, Ira Gershwin, Moss Hart, but I think they had worked at the group theater a few years before, and everyone knows each other. And it turned out that play lasted only 3 weeks. The group theater disbanded a couple months after that.
Oh, so
he was disappointed because he really, he loved being in Lady in the Dark. It was a wonderful experience, and I think it was Lionel Barrymore saw him in it, and his first entrance was in between Gertrude Lawrence doing some crazy thing and then Danny Kaye doing some other crazy thing, and he said, wow, you're the only person that could make an entrance that anyone would pay attention to between those two people. So he loved that experience, but he was worried when he went to New York. He went there because he didn't want to be remembered as a Neanderthal.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. 1
Yeah,
million
he wanted
years
people to
BC.
think he could do more than
Yeah.
grunt and groan.
Yeah,
So yeah,
Lon
so that was-
Chaney Jr.'s son. Yeah.
yeah, quite literally, yes.
Yeah, literally, yeah. And then he got a tease for doing, the Samson and Delilah part and Demetrius and the Glad and all of that stuff. But I always thought he was kind of like Errol Flynn, where Flynn felt he was getting stereotyped as a kid swashbuckling Robin Hood. But you know what? Who else could play those parts any better than Errol Flynn? And who else could play those parts any better than Victor Mature in a Cecil B. DeMille movie? I mean, I thought he was,
I
he was
agree.
terrific. Yeah, he was terrific.